Elijah Thornton pressed his dead daughter's ribbon to his lips and whispered her name one last time. 4 years since the robbery took everything. 4 years of whiskey and silence. Tonight he planned to join them in the frozen ground. Then he heard a child's scream from the abandoned jailhouse. What he found changed everything. A boy. Beaten. Mute. Clutching a blood-stained note. He saw everything. They'll kill him. Before you hear what happened next, subscribe to our channel and stay until the end. Comment your city below, let me know how far this story travels. The whiskey bottle slipped from Elijah Thornton's fingers and shattered against the floorboards. He didn't move to clean it. Didn't care. The amber liquid seeped into wood that had soaked up 4 years of his grief, and he just sat there in the dark, staring at nothing. New Year's Eve 1878. Somewhere in Copper Springs, folks were laughing, dancing, kissing their loved ones as midnight approached. Elijah could hear the faint music from the saloon 3 blocks away, carried on the bitter December wind. He reached for another bottle. "Happy New Year, Maggie," he whispered to the empty cabin. "Happy New Year, Lucy." His wife, his 8-year-old daughter, both buried on the hill behind the church, both dead because he'd chosen his badge over their safety. The robbery at First Mountain Bank. December 14th, 1874. 3 men with guns. Elijah had been across the street when the shooting started. He'd watched through the window as one of them put a bullet in Maggie's chest. Watched Lucy fall trying to reach her mother. By the time he got inside, they were gone. The robbers. His family. Everything. Elijah pulled the sheriff's star from his pocket. Tarnished now. He hadn't worn it in 3 years, but he couldn't throw it away either. Some nights he held it until the edges cut into his palm. The pain felt right. Tonight felt different. Tonight felt final. He'd written no letter, had no one to write to. His parents were dead. His brother hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. The town that once respected him now whispered behind his back. "There goes Thornton. Used to be somebody. Now look at him." Elijah lifted his father's Colt from the table, checked the chamber. 1 bullet was all he needed. "I'm coming home," he said. The scream cut through the night like breaking glass. Elijah's hand froze on the gun. A child's scream, high, terrified, coming from somewhere close. He told himself it was nothing. Probably some kid playing in the street. None of his business anymore. He wasn't the sheriff. Wasn't anybody's protector. Couldn't even protect his own family. The scream came again. Closer now. More desperate. "Not your problem, Thornton. You're done." He raised the Colt to his temple. A crash. The sound of wood splintering. Then running footsteps, small frantic heading toward the old jailhouse behind his cabin. Elijah's jaw tightened. The jailhouse had been empty since he resigned. Nobody used it anymore. The new sheriff worked out of the courthouse across town. The cells back there were rusted, forgotten, just like him. So why was someone running toward it? He lowered the gun. "Don't do it. Don't get involved. Let someone else handle it." But there was no one else. Not tonight. Not here. Elijah grabbed his coat and stepped into the cold. The jailhouse door hung open, banging against the frame in the wind. Elijah approached slowly, his boots crunching on frozen ground. 47 years old, and his knees ached like he was 70. Too much whiskey, too little food, too many nights sleeping in chairs instead of beds. He pushed the door wider. "Hello?" Silence. Then a small sound. A whimper barely audible coming from the back cell. Elijah moved forward. His eyes adjusted to the darkness. The old desk was overturned. Papers scattered everywhere. Someone had been here recently. There were fresh footprints in the dust. Small footprints. He reached the cell door. It was closed but not locked. He pulled it open slowly, the hinges screaming in protest. The boy was curled in the corner, 9, maybe 10 years old, dark hair matted with blood, clothes torn, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He looked up at Elijah with eyes that had seen something no child should see. Easy now. Elijah held up both hands. I ain't gonna hurt you. The boy pressed himself harder against the wall. What's your name, son? Nothing. Just that wide-eyed stare. The boy's lips moved, but no sound came out. Can you speak? The boy opened his mouth, closed it. Tears streamed down his dirty face, but still no words. Elijah crouched down slowly, keeping his movements careful. He'd seen this before during the war, soldiers who'd witnessed too much. Their voices just stopped. It's all right. You don't have to talk. He noticed the boy was clutching something. A piece of paper crumpled and stained with what looked like blood. What's that you got there? The boy looked down at his hand, as if he'd forgotten he was holding it. Then slowly, he extended it toward Elijah. Elijah took the note, unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, written by someone in a hurry. His name is Daniel Mercer. He saw everything. They killed his father. Victor Crane did it. The boy has proof. They'll kill him too. Please help. Tomas. Elijah read it twice. Daniel Mercer. The name hit him like a fist to the gut. William Mercer owned the biggest ranch in the territory. Thousands of acres. Hundreds of cattle. The man was practically royalty around here. And Victor Crane was his ranch foreman, a man Elijah had never trusted but could never prove anything against. Your father, Elijah said slowly. William Mercer. The boy, Daniel, nodded once. And Victor Crane. He killed him. Daniel's face crumpled. He nodded again, harder this time, and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. Elijah's mind raced. William Mercer dead, murdered by his own foreman. And this boy, this terrified mute boy, had witnessed it. When did this happen? Daniel held up 3 fingers. 3 days ago. A nod. And you've been running since then. Another nod. Elijah sat back on his heels. This was bad. This was very, very bad. Victor Crane wasn't just some drifter. He was connected, had friends in high places. Elijah had heard rumors for years, whispers about Judge Harrison Bell and Crane being partners in something dirty. Land deals. Cattle theft. Maybe worse. If Crane had killed Mercer, he wouldn't stop until he'd silenced the only witness. Does anyone know you're here? Daniel shook his head violently. Good. That's good. Elijah stood, his knees popping. We need to hoofbeats. Multiple horses approaching fast. Elijah grabbed Daniel's arm. Come with me, now. They moved through the back door of the jailhouse, just as the front door burst open. Elijah pulled the boy into the shadows behind the building, pressing them both against the cold wooden wall. Voices carried in the night air. Search every building. The boy can't have gotten far. Elijah recognized that voice. Victor Crane. What if someone's hiding him? Then we deal with them too. Elijah's hand moved to his holster. Empty. He'd left the Colt on his table. Damn fool. Daniel pressed against his side, trembling. Shh. Elijah put a finger to his lips. Not a sound. Footsteps approached their hiding spot. Lantern light swept across the snow. Elijah held his breath. The light moved past them. The footsteps continued toward the livery stable. There's nobody here, Mr. Crane. Keep looking. Check every cabin, every barn. The little bastard couldn't have gone far in this cold. The voices faded as the search moved away. Elijah waited a full minute before he moved. This way. He took Daniel's hand. Quiet now. They circled behind his cabin, staying in the shadows. Elijah's heart pounded harder than it had in years. He felt awake, alert, alive. He hadn't felt alive in a very long time. Inside his cabin, he locked the door and pulled the curtains tight. Daniel stood in the middle of the room, still shaking, still silent. Elijah knelt in front of him. Listen to me, boy. I need to know exactly what you saw. Can you do that? Daniel stared at him. You can't talk. I understand. But can you write? A small nod. Elijah grabbed paper and a pencil from his desk, pushed them into Daniel's hands. Tell me everything. The boy sat at the table. His hand trembled as he gripped the pencil. Then slowly he began to write. Pa found the books. What books? Daniel wrote faster now. Secret books, money books. Victor was stealing. Thousands of dollars. Pa was going to tell the marshal. So Crane killed him to keep him quiet. Daniel's pencil stopped. His face twisted with grief. He wrote one more line. He shot Pa in his office. Made me watch. Said if I told anyone, he'd kill me too. Elijah felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, something else. Rage. The proof, he said. The note said you have proof. What is it? Daniel reached inside his torn coat and pulled out a small leather book. He handed it to Elijah. Ledger. Dates. Numbers. Payments to names. Elijah recognized, including Judge Harrison Bell. This wasn't just murder. This was conspiracy. And it went all the way to the courthouse. Lord have mercy, Elijah whispered. A knock at the door. Both of them froze. Elijah. You in there? Clara Whitfield's voice. The widow who ran the pharmacy. The only person in town who still treated him like a human being. Stay here. Elijah pointed to the back room. Don't make a sound. He waited until Daniel was hidden, then opened the door a crack. Clara stood on his porch, her coat dusted with snow, her face pinched with worry. At 38, she was still beautiful. Dark hair streaked with gray eyes, the color of strong coffee. She'd lost her husband to fever 2 years ago and had run the pharmacy alone ever since. Men are searching the town, she said without preamble. Victor Crane and about 8 riders. They're looking for a boy. Said he's dangerous. Mentally disturbed. You believe them? Clara's eyes narrowed. I believe Victor Crane would lie about the time of day if it suited him. She paused. Elijah, do you know something? He should lie. Should send her away. Getting Clara involved would put her in danger. But he was tired of being alone. Tired of carrying everything himself. Come inside. Clara sat at the table reading Daniel's written account, while the boy huddled near the stove, wrapped in Elijah's coat. When she finished, her face was pale. This is... William Mercer is dead. 3 days ago, according to the boy. And Victor Crane killed him. The boy watched it happen. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. Dear God. It gets worse. Elijah showed her the ledger. Crane's been stealing from the ranch for years, and he's been paying off Judge Bell to look the other way. Clara studied the entries. Her expression hardened. I always knew there was something wrong with that man, the way he looked at people, like they were cattle to be herded. He's looking for Daniel, won't stop until he finds him. What are you going to do? Elijah laughed a bitter, hollow sound. Do Clara, I'm nobody. Haven't been the sheriff in 3 years. Half the town thinks I'm a drunk. The other half thinks I'm crazy. And what do you think? The question caught him off guard. Clara leaned forward. Elijah Thornton, I've known you for 15 years. I know what you were before the robbery. I know what you became after. But right now, in this moment, there's a child who needs your help. What are you going to do? Daniel was watching him, those dark eyes so full of fear and desperate hope. Elijah thought about the Colt on his table, the bullet in the chamber, the plan he'd had just an hour ago. Then he thought about Lucy, 8 years old, dark hair like Daniel's, the way she used to look at him like he could fix anything. He hadn't been able to save her, but maybe he could save this boy. I need to get him out of town, Elijah said slowly. Take him to the U.S. Marshal in Denver. The local law is compromised, but the federal boys won't be in Crane's pocket. Denver is 200 miles away, in winter. I know. You'll never make it alone. Probably not. Clara stood. Then you won't go alone. Clara. Don't. She held up her hand. I know what you're going to say. It's too dangerous. I could get hurt. I should stay here where it's safe. Her jaw tightened. My husband died because no one would help him when he got sick. The whole town turned their backs. I won't do that to this child. If Crane finds out you helped us, then he finds out. I'm done being afraid, Elijah. I've spent 2 years running a pharmacy and keeping my head down and trying not to make waves. And what has it gotten me? Nothing but loneliness and regret. She moved to Daniel, knelt beside him. I'm Clara. I'm going to help you. All right? We're going to get you somewhere safe. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and took her hand. Something shifted in Elijah's chest. A crack in the wall he'd built around himself. Just a small one, but it was there. We leave before dawn, he said. Before Crane's men can set up roadblocks. I know a path through the mountain's old mining trail. It'll be rough, but it's the only way they won't expect. What about supplies medicine? The boy's hurt. Can you get what we need from the pharmacy without being seen? Clara nodded. I'll go now. Meet you at the north edge of town in 2 hours. She paused at the door, looking back at Elijah with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. Nothing. Just, it's good to see you again. The real you. She was gone before he could respond. Elijah turned to Daniel. We've got 2 hours. You should try to sleep. The boy shook his head. He picked up the pencil again and wrote, You were going to hurt yourself. Elijah went still. What? Daniel pointed to the Colt on the table. Wrote again. I saw through the window. Before I screamed. You were going to use the gun on yourself. That's not... Elijah's voice trailed off. He couldn't lie to those eyes. Couldn't pretend. Yeah, he said finally. I was. Daniel wrote, Why? Because I lost people I loved. Because I couldn't save them. Because living without them felt too hard. The boy nodded slowly. Then he wrote, I lost Pa. It hurts. I know. But I don't want to die. You're not going to. I won't let that happen. Promise. Elijah looked at this child, battered, traumatized, mute, from shock, but still fighting, still hoping, still reaching out for connection. Lucy would have liked him. I promise, Elijah said. And for the first time in 4 years he meant it. Daniel put down the pencil. Then hesitantly, he moved closer to Elijah, closer still, until he was leaning against him, his small body pressed to Elijah's side. Elijah sat frozen. He hadn't touched another person with tenderness since Maggie died. Hadn't allowed himself that vulnerability. Slowly, carefully, he put his arm around the boy. Daniel let out a shaky breath and closed his eyes. They sat like that for a long time. The fire crackling, the wind, howling outside danger, circling them like wolves around a campfire. But inside the cabin, something was beginning. Something neither of them had expected. 2 hours later, Elijah and Daniel slipped through the back streets of Copper Springs. The search parties had moved to the south side of town. Elijah could see their lanterns in the distance, hear their shouts as they kicked in doors and questioned anyone foolish enough to be outside. Clara was waiting at the north edge, holding the reins of 3 horses, her mare, and 2 from Elijah's small stable. I brought everything I could carry, she whispered. Bandages, carbolic acid laudanum for pain food for a week. Good. Elijah lifted Daniel onto the smallest horse. Can you ride, boy? Daniel nodded. Stay close to me. If shooting starts, you lie flat and let the horse run. Understand? Another nod. Elijah mounted his own horse, a gray gelding named Ghost. He'd ridden this animal through Indian territory and back. Trusted it with his life. Clara climbed onto her mare. Which way? North first, then we cut west into the mountains once we clear the valley. They moved out, keeping to the shadows, riding slow and quiet. Behind them, Copper Springs celebrated the new year with fireworks and laughter, oblivious to the drama unfolding in its midst. Ahead of them lay 200 miles of frozen wilderness, a corrupt judge, a killer with unlimited resources and odds that would make any sane person turn back. But Elijah wasn't turning back. For the first time in 4 years, he had something to live for. Someone to protect. A reason to be the man he used to be. He touched the sheriff's star in his pocket. Not yet, he thought. But maybe someday. They rode north into the darkness, into the unknown. And Elijah Thornton, who had planned to die on New Year's Eve, found himself hoping he would live to see spring. They rode through the darkness for 3 hours before Daniel started slipping from his saddle. Elijah caught him just in time, pulling the boy onto his own horse. Daniel's skin burned with fever. The wounds on his head had reopened, blood seeping through the bandages Clara had applied. "We need to stop," Clara said. "Not yet. We're still too close." "Elijah, look at him. He won't survive another hour of riding like this." She was right. Elijah knew she was right. But stopping meant risking capture, and capture meant death for all of them. "There's an old mining cabin about 2 miles ahead," he said. "We can rest there until dawn." The cabin was barely standing. Roof half-collapsed, walls rotted through in places. But it had 4 walls and a door that locked, and right now that was enough. Clara laid Daniel on the floor and checked his wounds. Her face grew grim. "The head wound is infected. He's burning up." "Can you treat it?" "I can try. But he needs rest, real rest, not bouncing on a horse through frozen mountains." Elijah paced the small space. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving. Crane's men were out there. Every hour they delayed was another hour for the noose to tighten. But Daniel's breathing was shallow now. Labored. The boy who had survived 3 days of running was finally breaking down. "We stay until morning," Elijah said. "But we leave at first light, no matter what." Clara nodded and went to work. Elijah stood guard at the window, watching the darkness for any sign of pursuit. His hand rested on the Colt he'd grabbed before leaving, the same gun he'd planned to use on himself just hours ago. Funny how things changed. Around midnight, Daniel's fever spiked. He thrashed on the floor, crying out wordlessly, fighting invisible demons. Clara held him down while Elijah forced water between his cracked lips. "Stay with us, boy," Elijah muttered. "Don't you quit on me now." Daniel's eyes flew open. For a moment they were clear, focused. He looked directly at Elijah and mouthed one word: "Pa." Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. "Is he?" Elijah's voice cracked. "He's alive, just unconscious." Clara pressed a cool cloth to Daniel's forehead. "But Elijah, if this infection spreads..." "It won't. We'll get him to Denver. We'll find proper doctors. Denver is still 180 miles away. Then we'll ride faster." Clara looked at him with something like wonder. "You've changed. In just a few hours you've changed." "I haven't changed. I just remembered who I used to be." She touched his arm. That man was worth remembering. They stayed like that, her hand on his arm, until Daniel stirred again. Dawn came gray and bitter. Daniel's fever had broken, but he was weak, could barely sit up on his own. "He can't ride," Clara said. "He has to. Elijah." "Clara, listen to me." Elijah knelt beside her. "If we stay here, Crane will find us. He's got men everywhere. Resources we can't match. Our only chance is to keep moving, to stay ahead of him, until we reach someone who can help. And if Daniel dies on the trail?" The question hung in the air like gun smoke. Elijah looked at the boy. So small, so fragile, so much like Lucy had been. "He won't die," Elijah said. "I won't let him." He lifted Daniel in his arms and carried him to the horses. They rode west into the mountains. The trail was treacherous. Ice-covered rocks, narrow ledges with drops of hundreds of feet. One wrong step, and they'd all be dead at the bottom of a canyon. Daniel rode with Elijah, now wrapped in blankets, his head resting against Elijah's chest. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling words that made no sense. But sometimes in his delirium, he spoke clearly. "Don't hurt him," Daniel whispered. "Please, Victor, don't hurt Pa." Elijah's arms tightened around him. "Shh, you're safe now. There was so much blood, so much blood." "I know, but it's over. You're with me now." "Who are you?" "I'm—" Elijah hesitated. "I'm someone who's going to keep you safe." Daniel's hand found Elijah's coat and gripped it tightly. "Promise. I promise." The boy relaxed slightly and drifted back to sleep. Clara rode up beside them. "He's attached to you." "He's scared and confused. He'd attach to anyone right now." "No, it's more than that. He chose you, Elijah. Back in that jailhouse, when he had nowhere else to go, he chose to trust you. He was desperate. Maybe. Or maybe he saw something in you that you've been too blind to see yourself." Before Elijah could respond, Ghost stopped abruptly. Elijah's hand went to his gun. "What is it?" Then he heard it. Hoofbeats. Coming up the trail behind them. Fast. "Move!" Elijah snapped. "Now!" They spurred their horses forward, but the trail was too narrow for speed. The hoofbeats grew louder. Closer. Elijah looked back and saw them. 5 riders, maybe 6, pushing hard up the mountain. Too far away to identify, but he didn't need to see their faces to know who they were. "Crane's men," Clara said. "Keep riding, don't stop for anything." "Elijah, they're gaining." "I know, just keep moving." The trail split ahead. One path continued west, the other dropped down into a narrow gorge. Elijah made a split-second decision. "Take the boy and go left. Follow the trail until you hit the river, then cross and keep heading west. I'll meet you on the other side." "What are you going to do?" "Buy you time." Clara's eyes widened. "No. Elijah, no. You can't." "I can, and I will." He passed Daniel to her, the boy stirring at the movement. "Take care of him, Clara. Promise me." "I won't leave you." "You're not leaving me. You're saving him." Elijah pulled the ledger from his saddlebag and pressed it into her hands. "This is proof of everything. If something happens to me, get this to the marshal. Make sure Crane pays for what he did." "Elijah." "Go, now." Clara looked at him for one long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. Hard, desperate, full of everything they didn't have time to say. "Don't you dare die," she whispered. Then she was gone, spurring her horse down the left fork. Daniel clutched against her. Elijah turned Ghost to face the approaching riders. 6 of them. He counted now as they rounded the bend. All armed. All riding like men with murder on their minds. Elijah drew his Colt and waited. The lead rider pulled up short when he saw Elijah blocking the trail. The others fanned out behind him, hands on their weapons. "Well, well." The rider pushed back his hat, revealing a face Elijah knew. Garrett Walsh. One of Crane's foremen. A mean son of a bitch who'd been suspected of killing 2 drifters last summer. Elijah Thornton. Been a while. Not long enough. "Where's the boy?" "What boy?" Garrett spat. "Don't play games, Thornton. We know you've got him. We tracked you from town." "You tracked wrong." "That's so." Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. "Then you won't mind if we have a look around." "I mind very much." "See, that's your problem, Thornton. You always minded too much. Stuck your nose where it didn't belong. Asked questions you shouldn't have asked." Garrett's smile was ugly. "That's why you're not sheriff anymore, ain't it? Because you couldn't just let things be." "I'm not sheriff because I lost everything that mattered, but that doesn't mean I forgot how to shoot." The other riders shifted nervously. They knew Elijah's reputation, knew what he'd been before the bottle took him. "There's 6 of us," Garrett said. "One of you. Math ain't in your favor." "Maybe not, but I guarantee I'll take at least 3 of you with me. Maybe 4. Elijah cocked the hammer. "Question is, Garrett, do you feel lucky enough to bet your life you won't be one of them?" Silence. The wind howled through the gorge. Horses stamped nervously. Garrett's smile faltered. "Mr. Crane wants that boy alive," he said finally. "Says he's dangerous, mentally unstable. Been telling folks all kinds of lies about what happened to his father." Funny thing about lies. They tend to unravel eventually. Is that so? William Mercer was a good man. Everyone in the territory knew it. You really think people are going to believe his own son made up stories about his murder? They'll believe what we tell them to believe. Will they? Elijah kept his voice steady. Or will they start asking questions? Start wondering why Crane was so desperate to find one little boy. Start looking at those account books a little more carefully. Garrett's eyes narrowed. "What do you know about account books?" "Enough." The word hung in the air like a lit fuse. Elijah saw Garrett calculating, weighing options. The man was mean, but he wasn't stupid. He knew something had shifted. "Boys," Garrett said slowly. "Change of plans. Mr. Crane's going to want to talk to Thornton personally." "I ain't going anywhere with you." "Wasn't asking." 3 of the riders moved simultaneously, going for their guns. Elijah was faster. His first shot took Garrett in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. His second hit another rider square in the chest. The third went wide as Ghost reared, but it was enough to scatter the remaining men. Elijah wheeled his horse and bolted up the trail. Gunfire erupted behind him. Bullets whined past his ears. One grazed his arm, leaving a burning streak of pain. But he kept riding, pushing Ghost harder than he ever had. The trail narrowed, steepened, became almost impassable. But Ghost was a mountain horse, bred for this terrain. He picked his way through the rocks with sure-footed determination, while the pursuing horses stumbled and fell behind. By the time Elijah reached the ridgeline, the gunfire had stopped. He looked back. The riders were still there, but they'd given up the chase. Too dangerous, too steep. They'd have to find another way around. Elijah had bought them time. Maybe a few hours. Maybe more. It would have to be enough. He found Clara and Daniel at the river crossing, just where he'd told them to wait. Clara's face flooded with relief when she saw him. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the blood on his sleeve. "Just a scratch." "Let me see." "Later. We need to keep moving." "Elijah." "Clara." He grabbed her shoulders. "They'll find another way around. Probably already have riders circling to cut us off. We need to reach Miller's Pass before nightfall or we're trapped." She nodded. "Can you ride?" "I can ride." Daniel was awake now, watching them with those haunted eyes. He held up his hand, showing them a piece of paper. "Are you okay?" he'd written. Elijah managed a smile. "I'm fine, son. Just a little excitement. You saved us." "Not yet, but I'm working on it." They crossed the river, the icy water reaching up to the horses' bellies. Daniel clung to Clara, shivering violently. Elijah stayed close, ready to grab them if anyone lost their footing. They made it across. Kept riding. The mountains closed in around them. The trail became a tunnel of rock and ice, twisting through canyons that saw sunlight for maybe 2 hours a day. It was slow going, but it was progress. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat. Clara changed the bandage on Elijah's arm. The bullet had taken a chunk of flesh, but missed the bone. She cleaned it with carbolic acid, while he gritted his teeth against the pain. "You're lucky," she said. "Don't feel lucky. You're alive. That's lucky." Daniel sat nearby eating dried beef with mechanical determination. The fever had broken, but he was still weak, still silent. "How long until we reach Denver?" Clara asked. "At this pace, 5 days. Maybe 6. Will we make it?" We have to." She finished bandaging his arm and sat back. "Elijah, there's something I need to tell you." "What?" "Before I left the pharmacy, I sent a telegram to my brother in Denver. He's a lawyer, works with the federal court sometimes." Elijah stared at her. "You what?" "I told him everything. About Mercer's murder, about Crane, about the ledger. I told him we were coming and that we needed help." "Clara, if anyone intercepted that telegram—" "They didn't. I sent it through the night operator, Tommy Chen. He owed me a favor." She met his eyes. "I wasn't going to let us ride 200 miles without someone knowing the truth. If something happens to us, my brother will make sure the story gets out." Elijah wanted to be angry, wanted to yell at her for taking such a risk. But he couldn't, because she was right. They were 3 people against an army. They needed allies. "Your brother," he said. "Can he be trusted? With my life? With Daniel's life? Then let's hope we live long enough to meet him." They rode on. The afternoon brought new dangers. The trail grew steeper, icier. Several times they had to dismount and lead the horses through passages that seemed impossible. Daniel walked between them, now holding Clara's hand. He was steadier on his feet, but his silence worried Elijah. The boy hadn't tried to write anything in hours. Just walked and watched and waited. "Hey," Elijah said during one of their rest stops. "You doing all right?" Daniel looked at him, shrugged. "I know this is hard. I know you're scared. But we're going to get through this. You understand?" The boy reached for his pencil and paper, wrote slowly. "My pa used to say that. We'll get through this." He said it the night before Victor killed him. Elijah's heart clenched. "Your pa was right. You did get through it. You survived. You're still here." But he's not. No, he's not. Elijah crouched down to Daniel's level. "And nothing I say is going to make that okay. Losing someone you love, it leaves a hole in you that never really fills. I know because I've got holes like that too." Daniel's eyes searched his face. "Who did you lose?" "My wife, my daughter. They died 4 years ago." "How bad men, like Victor Crane." Elijah's voice caught. "I couldn't save them. I was right there, and I couldn't save them." "Is that why you were going to hurt yourself?" "Yeah, that's why." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he wrote, "I'm glad you didn't." "So am I. My pa would have liked you." Elijah had to look away, had to blink hard against the burning in his eyes. "Come on," he said roughly. "We need to keep moving." They reached Miller's Pass at sunset. The narrow gap in the mountains was their gateway to the plains beyond and to Denver. But as they approached, Elijah saw something that made his blood freeze. Riders. At least a dozen of them blocking the pass. "Get back," he hissed, pulling Daniel behind a boulder. Clara ducked down beside them. "How did they get ahead of us?" "They know these mountains better than I thought. Must have taken the southern route." "What do we do?" Elijah peered around the boulder. The riders weren't moving, just waiting. They knew their quarry was close. And in the center of the group, sitting tall on a black stallion, was a figure Elijah recognized immediately. Victor Crane. "Thornton." Crane's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "I know you're out there. I know you've got the boy. There's nowhere left to run." Elijah didn't respond. "Here's my offer. Send out the boy and I'll let you and the woman go. You have my word." Clara's hand found Elijah's, squeezed tight. "Your word ain't worth spit," Elijah muttered. "I heard that," Crane called. He sounded amused. "Fair enough. Let me put it another way then. Send out the boy, or I'll hunt you down like dogs. I've got 50 men between here and Denver. You won't make it 10 miles. Daniel tugged on Elijah's sleeve, held up a paper. "Give me to him." "What? No. He'll kill you, both of you. I'm not worth that." "Boy, you listen to me. Elijah grabbed Daniel's shoulders. "You are worth that. You're worth everything. And I am not handing you over to the man who murdered your father. Not now. Not ever." "But no buts. We're getting out of this. All of us. Together." Clara spoke up. "There might be another way." "What way?" "The old mine shaft. About half a mile back. My husband used to talk about it. Said it ran clear through the mountain. Comes out on the other side of the pass." "A mine shaft. In the dark with a child. It's better than riding into an ambush." Elijah looked at the blocked pass. At the army of men waiting to kill them. At the boy whose life depended on his next decision. "Show me," he said. The mine entrance was half hidden behind fallen rocks and dead brush. They never would have found it without Clara. "The supports might be rotted," she warned. "My husband said most of these old shafts were abandoned because they became unstable." "Then we go carefully." Elijah lit a torch and led the way into the darkness. Clara followed with Daniel, the horses left behind with enough food and water to survive until someone found them. The shaft was narrow, cold. The walls pressed in from both sides, and the ceiling hung low enough that Elijah had to crouch in places. But it was passable. Barely. They moved slowly, testing each step before committing their weight. Daniel walked between them, his hand gripping Clara's coat. "You all right back there?" Elijah called. Clara's voice came out of the darkness. "Still here?" "Daniel." A tap on the wall, the boy's signal for yes. They walked for what felt like hours. The torch burned low, then lower. Elijah started counting steps, trying to estimate how far they'd come. Then the shaft opened up. Not outside. Into a larger chamber. And in the flickering torchlight, Elijah saw something that made him stop dead. "What is it?" Clara pushed up beside him. Then she saw it too. "Oh my God!" Bodies. At least a dozen of them scattered across the chamber floor. Old bodies dried and mummified by the cold mountain air. They'd been dead for years. And next to them, stacked in neat piles, were wooden crates marked with a familiar symbol. The Mercer Ranch brand. "This is where Crane hid the stolen goods," Elijah whispered. "All those cattle that went missing over the years. He wasn't selling them. He was hiding them." "But who are these people?" Elijah examined the nearest body. A man middle-aged with a bullet hole in his skull. "Witnesses," he said. "Anyone who got too close to the truth." Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the carnage with wide eyes. "Keep moving," Elijah said. "We can't stay here." They crossed the chamber, stepping carefully around the bodies. On the far side, another shaft continued into darkness. Fresh air hit Elijah's face. Cold. Clean. They were close to the exit. 20 more minutes of walking, and they emerged onto a moonlit ridge on the far side of Miller's Pass. Below them, the plain stretched out toward Denver. Behind them, Crane's men still waited at the blocked pass, unaware that their quarry had slipped through their fingers. "We made it," Clara breathed. "Not yet." Elijah looked at the distant horizon. "But we're closer." Daniel tugged on his sleeve, held up a paper scrawled in the dim moonlight. "What happens now?" Elijah looked at the boy, at Clara, at the long road ahead. "Now we finish this," he said. "We get to Denver, we find the marshal, and we make sure Victor Crane pays for every single person in that mine shaft. Every single person he's ever hurt." Daniel nodded slowly. Then he wrote one more line. "Including my pa. Especially your pa." The boy's hand found Elijah's, held on tight. They started down the mountain together, 3 broken people, bound by circumstance and choice, heading toward a reckoning that none of them could have predicted. And somewhere behind them, Victor Crane discovered that his quarry had vanished, and his rage echoed through the mountains like thunder. They walked through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Miller's Pass. Daniel stumbled twice before Elijah lifted him onto his back. The boy weighed almost nothing. His thin arms wrapped around Elijah's neck, his breath warm against Elijah's ear. "You doing okay up there?" A tap on his shoulder. "Yes." Clara walked beside them, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes sharp and watchful. She hadn't complained once since they'd left the mine shaft. Hadn't asked to rest, just kept moving. "There's a way station about 5 miles ahead," Elijah said. "Old Perkins' place. He runs supplies between the mountain towns and Denver. If we can reach him before dawn, he might give us horses." "Can he be trusted?" "He hates Victor Crane. Everyone who works honest in these parts hates Crane." "That's not exactly a ringing endorsement." "It's the best I've got." They reached Perkins's station as the first gray light crept over the horizon. The old man was already awake, feeding his mules by lantern light. He looked up when they approached his hand, moving toward the rifle propped against the fence. "Who's there?" "Elijah Thornton." Perkins squinted into the dim light. Then his weathered face broke into a gap-toothed grin. "Well, I'll be damned. Elijah Thornton alive and walking. Heard you drunk yourself to death." "Not yet." "And who's this you've got with you?" "Friends. We need horses, Perkins. Fast ones." The old man's grin faded as he took in their appearance. The blood on Elijah's sleeve. Clara's torn dress. The boy clinging to Elijah's back like a frightened animal. "You in trouble, Thornton?" "The worst kind." "Crane." "How'd you guess?" Perkins spat. "That son of a bitch has been causing trouble for everyone lately. Sent his men through here 2 days ago asking questions about travelers. I told them I hadn't seen nobody." He jerked his head toward the stable. "Come inside. Tell me what's going on." Over hot coffee and cold biscuits, Elijah told him everything. William Mercer's murder, the ledger, the bodies in the mine shaft, the army of men hunting them. Perkins listened without interruption. When Elijah finished, the old man sat back and let out a long whistle. "Boy, you sure know how to step in it. I didn't ask for this." "No, I don't reckon you did." Perkins looked at Daniel, who sat pressed against Clara's side, watching them with those haunted eyes. "This the witness? His name is Daniel. He saw Crane kill his father. And he can't talk. Not since it happened." Perkins shook his head slowly. "Poor little fella. Seen too much for his age. Can you help us or not?" "I can give you horses, good ones too. But Thornton, you need to understand something." Perkins leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Crane's got this whole territory locked up. He's been building his network for years. Judges, sheriffs, businessmen, they're all in his pocket. You think you're going to ride into Denver and the marshal's just going to believe you. I've got proof. Proof can be lost. Witnesses can be silenced." Perkins glanced at Daniel. "You think Crane doesn't know that?" "What are you saying?" "I'm saying watch your back, even in Denver, especially in Denver." They left Perkins Station an hour later, mounted on 3 strong horses. The old man had refused payment. "Just make sure that bastard pays for what he's done," he said. "That'll be payment enough." The plains stretched out before them, vast and empty, under a gray winter sky. Denver lay 3 days to the east across open country that offered no place to hide. Elijah pushed the pace hard. They stopped only when absolutely necessary, eating in the saddle, drinking from canteens without dismounting. Daniel rode with Clara, now his small body tucked against hers. By midday, Elijah noticed the dust cloud behind them. "We've got company," he said quietly. Clara turned to look. Her face went pale. "How many?" "Hard to say. At least 10. Maybe more." "Can we outrun them?" "Not likely. They've got fresh horses. Ours are already tired." "Then what do we do?" Elijah scanned the horizon. Nothing but flat land in every direction. No cover, no shelter. Nowhere to make a stand. Then he saw it. A cluster of buildings in the distance, maybe 2 miles ahead. "What's that?" "Looks like a town. Or what's left of one." "We make for it. Try to lose them in the buildings." They kicked their horses into a gallop, racing toward the abandoned settlement. Behind them, the dust cloud grew larger, closer. The town was a ghost. Empty buildings lined a single dirt street, their windows dark and hollow. A sign hanging from rusted chains read, "Welcome to Redemption," in faded letters. "Ironic," Clara muttered. "Get inside." Elijah pointed to the largest building, what looked like an old hotel. "Both of you, find somewhere to hide." "What about you?" "I'm going to buy us some time." Elijah, "No, not again." "Clara." He grabbed her arm, pulled her close. "Listen to me. That boy is the only witness to Crane's crimes, the only proof that exists. If he dies, Crane wins. You understand? He wins everything. And if you die, then at least I die for something that matters." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she kissed him hard and desperate the way she had on the mountain. "Come back to me," she whispered. "I'll try." She took Daniel's hand and ran toward the hotel. The boy looked back, once his eyes finding Elijah's across the empty street. He raised his hand in a small wave. Elijah waved back. Then he turned to face the riders. There were 12 of them. They rode into town in a loose formation, spreading out to cover the street. At their head was a man Elijah didn't recognize, tall, thin, with a scar running down one cheek. "Thornton," the man called out. "We know you're here. We saw you ride in." Elijah stepped out from behind the water trough where he'd been crouching. His Colt was in his hand, hammer cocked. "That's close enough." The riders pulled up short. The scarred man smiled. "You're Thornton, the drunk sheriff. Former sheriff, and I've been sober for 3 days now." "Impressive. Mr. Crane will be pleased to hear that." "Crane can go to hell." "Eventually I'm sure he will, but for now he'd like a word with you, and with the boy." "The boy's not here." "Now we both know that's not true." The scarred man made a show of looking around the empty town. "This place has been abandoned for 5 years. Nobody comes here unless they're running from something, or someone. Maybe I just like the architecture. Mr. Crane is willing to make a deal. Hand over the boy and the ledger, and he'll let you and the woman walk away. You have his word." "Crane's word isn't worth the air it takes to speak it." The scarred man shrugged. "Suit yourself. Boys, spread out. Search every building. Kill anyone who resists." The riders began to dismount. Elijah fired. His first shot took the scarred man in the throat. The second and third dropped 2 more riders before they could clear their saddles. The rest dove for cover, returning fire wildly. Elijah ran. He ducked into an alley, bullets kicking up dust around his feet. Behind him, he heard shouts, curses, the sound of boots on dirt. They were coming after him. Good. That meant they weren't searching for Clara and Daniel. He ran through the empty buildings, using his knowledge of small-town layouts to stay ahead of his pursuers. Through the general store, out the back. Across the alley to the blacksmith shop. Through a hole in the wall to the livery stable. The stable was empty except for old hay and rusted equipment. Elijah crouched behind a fallen beam, reloading his Colt with trembling hands. 6 shots fired, maybe 4 or 5 men down. That left 7 or 8 plus however many reinforcements were on the way. He couldn't win this fight. He knew that, but he didn't need to win. He just needed to buy enough time for Clara and Daniel to escape. Footsteps outside. He went this way. Check the stable. Elijah held his breath. The door creaked open. A man stepped inside, rifle-raised eyes scanning the shadows. Elijah waited until he was 3 feet away. Then he lunged. They went down hard, crashing through a rotted stall door. The rifle flew from the man's hands. Elijah got his arm around the man's throat and squeezed. The man struggled, clawed at Elijah's arm, made choking sounds. Then he went limp. Elijah rolled away, gasping. His arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed him back on the mountain. Blood was seeping through Clara's bandage. No time to worry about that now. He grabbed the rifle and moved toward the back of the stable. There had to be a way out. A door. A window. Something. He found a loose board in the back wall and kicked it through. Crawled out into an alley behind the building. and found himself face to face with Victor Crane. "Hello, Thornton." Crane was exactly as Elijah remembered him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with cold gray eyes, and a smile that never reached them. He wore a black coat and a black hat like a preacher or an undertaker. "Crane, you've caused me a great deal of trouble." "Not as much as I'm going to cause." Crane laughed. It was a genuine laugh full of amusement. "I like you, Thornton. I always have. You were a good sheriff once. Fair, honest, incorruptible." He shook his head slowly. "That's why I never bothered you. Never tried to bring you into the fold. I knew you wouldn't bend. And now you're in my way, and I can't have that. So kill me." "Oh, I will, eventually. But first I need the boy, and I need that ledger." "Can't help you." "Can't or won't?" "Both." Crane's smile faded. "You know I didn't want to kill William Mercer. He was a good man, a good employer. But he found those books, and he was going to talk. I couldn't let that happen." "So you shot him in front of his son?" "The boy was supposed to be at school. It was an unfortunate complication." "Unfortunate?" Elijah's grip tightened on the rifle. "A 9-year-old boy watched his father die, and you call it unfortunate. What would you prefer I call it? Tragic, regrettable words don't change facts, Thornton. William is dead. The boy is a witness, and witnesses have to be dealt with. Over my dead body, if necessary." They stared at each other across the narrow alley. Two men who had been circling each other for years, finally face to face. "You know what I found in that mine shaft," Elijah said. "The bodies. At least a dozen of them. Men you killed to protect your secrets. Those men made choices. Bad choices. They paid the price." "And Judge Bell. Was he a bad choice too?" Crane's eyes flickered. Just for a second, but Elijah caught it. "What do you know about Judge Bell?" "I know he's been taking your money for years. I know he's helped you cover up God knows how many crimes. And I know that when the federal marshal sees that ledger, Bell is going to hang right alongside you." "You're bluffing. You don't have the ledger." "Don't I?" Crane's facade cracked, just slightly, but it was enough. "Where is it?" "Somewhere you'll never find it. The woman has it, the pharmacist." Crane nodded slowly. "She's cleverer than I gave her credit for. She's cleverer than you'll ever know. It doesn't matter. My men will find her. They'll find the boy. And then they'll find the ledger. Your men are dead. Most of them anyway. I have more men. And I have something you don't." "What's that?" "Nothing to lose." Elijah raised the rifle. Crane drew faster. The gunshot echoed through the empty town, sending birds scattering from the rooftops. Elijah staggered, looked down. Blood spreading across his shirt just below his ribs. "You're a brave man, Thornton," Crane said, holstering his pistol. "Stupid but brave." Elijah tried to raise the rifle. His arms wouldn't cooperate. The world was going gray at the edges. "The boy," he gasped. "Leave him alone." "I can't do that. He's just a child. He's a witness. Crane." Elijah fell to his knees. The rifle clattered to the dirt. "Please." Crane stood over him, his shadow blocking out the gray winter sky. "Goodbye, Thornton. I'd say I'm sorry, but I'm really not." He raised his pistol for the killing shot. The gunshot came from behind him. Crane spun his gun, swinging toward the new threat. A second shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. A third hit him in the leg, dropping him to the ground. Through blurring vision, Elijah saw a figure approaching. Small, determined, holding a rifle that was almost too big for him. Daniel. The boy walked toward Crane with steady steps, the rifle trained on the man who had killed his father. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, but his eyes burned with something that went beyond fear. "You—" Crane struggled to rise. "You little—" "Daniel." Clara appeared behind the boy, her face streaked with tears. "Daniel, stop!" The boy didn't stop. He walked right up to Victor Crane and pressed the rifle barrel against the man's chest. "Daniel!" Elijah's voice was barely a whisper. "Don't." The boy looked at him, and for the first time since Elijah had found him in that jailhouse, Daniel spoke. "He killed my pa." 3 words. Rough and broken, like they'd been dragged over gravel, but words nonetheless. "I know." Elijah forced himself to his feet, one hand pressed against the wound in his side. "I know he did, and he's going to pay for it. But not like this." "Why not?" "Because you're not a killer, Daniel. You're a boy who lost his father. You're a victim. Don't let Crane turn you into something else." Daniel's hands trembled on the rifle. "I want him dead." "So do I. But if you kill him now in cold blood, you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. Trust me, son. That's a weight you don't want to carry." Tears spilled down Daniel's cheeks. His whole body shook. "He made me watch. He made me watch while Pa begged for his life. He laughed. He laughed while Pa died. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to see that." Elijah took a step closer, then another. "But you're better than him. You understand? You're better." Daniel looked at Crane, who lay bleeding in the dirt. Then he looked back at Elijah. "Pa would have wanted me to kill him." "No, your pa would have wanted you to live, to grow up, to be happy. That's what any father wants for his son." The rifle wavered. "Give me the gun, Daniel." "I can't." "Yes, you can. You're the bravest boy I've ever met. You survived 3 days alone in the wilderness. You saved my life tonight. You can do this too." A long moment passed, the longest of Elijah's life. Then Daniel lowered the rifle. Elijah took it from his hands and pulled the boy close, holding him tight against his chest. Daniel broke down completely, sobbing into Elijah's blood-soaked shirt. "I've got you," Elijah whispered. "I've got you." Clara was already moving, binding Crane's hands with rope she'd found somewhere. The man cursed and spat, but he was too badly wounded to fight. "We need to move," she said. "His men will have heard the shots." "The horses?" "Still behind the hotel. I kept them hidden." Elijah nodded. Tried to take a step. His legs buckled. Clara caught him. "You're losing too much blood." "I'll make it." "Elijah." "I'll make it. Help me to the horses." With Clara on one side and Daniel on the other, Elijah stumbled through the ghost town toward the waiting horses. Behind them, Victor Crane screamed threats and promises of revenge. They ignored him. At the horses, Clara helped Elijah into the saddle. The world spun dangerously, but he held on. "What about Crane?" she asked. "Leave him. His men will find him, and by the time they do, we'll be halfway to Denver." "Will that be enough?" Elijah looked at Daniel, who sat mounted on his own horse, now his face streaked with tears, but his eyes clear and focused. "It'll have to be." They rode east toward Denver, toward justice, toward whatever future awaited them on the other side of this nightmare. And for the first time in 4 years, Elijah Thornton allowed himself to hope. Elijah woke to white walls and the smell of carbolic acid. For a moment, he thought he was dead. Then the pain hit a deep burning ache in his side that made him gasp. "Easy." Clara's face appeared above him. "Don't try to move." "Where?" "Denver. St. Joseph's Hospital. We made it, Elijah. We made it." He tried to sit up. The pain knocked him flat again. "The bullet nicked your liver," Clara said. "Doctor said you're lucky to be alive." "Daniel." "He's fine. He's been sitting by your bed for 3 days waiting for you to wake up." 3 days? You lost a lot of blood. There were times—" Her voice caught. "There were times we weren't sure you'd pull through." Elijah turned his head. Daniel sat in a chair by the window, watching him with those dark, serious eyes. "Hey, son." "Hey." Daniel's voice was still rough, still hesitant, but stronger than before. "You scared us." "Sorry about that." Don't do it again." Elijah almost laughed. It came out as a cough instead. "Where's Crane?" Clara and Daniel exchanged a look. "What?" Elijah demanded. "What happened?" "His men found him," Clara said quietly. "They got him to a doctor. He's alive." "Damn. But that's not all." She pulled a newspaper from the bedside table and held it up. The headline read, "Ranch Foreman Arrested for Murder. Judge Bell Implicated in Cover-Up." "The marshal moved fast," Clara explained. "My brother got the ledger to him the same day we arrived. They arrested Crane at the doctor's office and Bell at his home. Both are in federal custody now. And Daniel? Safe. The marshal has him under protection until the trial." Elijah let his head fall back against the pillow. For the first time in what felt like years, he allowed himself to breathe. "It's over." "Not yet. There's still the trial. Daniel will have to testify." "Can he do that?" They both looked at the boy. Daniel squared his shoulders. "I can do it." "You're sure those lawyers are going to be rough on you?" "I watched my pa die. I ran for 3 days through the mountains. I shot the man who killed him." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I can answer some questions." Elijah felt something warm spread through his chest. Pride. That's what it was. He was proud of this boy. "All right then," he said. "Let's finish this." The trial began 2 weeks later. The federal courthouse was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, crowds gathered outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the proceedings. The murder of William Mercer had been headline news across the territory, and everyone wanted to see justice done. Or prevented, depending on who was paying them. Elijah sat in the front row, still weak, but refusing to stay in bed. Clara sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm. Daniel was sequestered in a back room waiting to be called as a witness. Victor Crane sat at the defense table, his arm in a sling, his leg in a splint. Despite his injuries, he looked confident, almost smug. Beside him sat his lawyer, a slick Denver attorney named Montgomery Price, who had never lost a case. Price had gotten murderers, acquitted robbers, freed corrupt politicians, exonerated. He was the best money could buy. And Crane had plenty of money. Judge Harrison Bell was notably absent. He'd been removed from the bench pending his own trial, replaced by a federal judge named Thomas Whitmore, who had a reputation for fairness and an immunity to bribery. The prosecutor was a young man named Edward Clark, Clara's brother. He was 32 years old with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. He'd been preparing for this case non-stop since the moment Clara had placed that ledger in his hands. "This case is about one thing," Clark began in his opening statement. "A man who thought he was above the law, a man who stole, lied, and murdered to protect his secrets, and a boy who had the courage to tell the truth." Price's opening was equally dramatic. "This case is about a disturbed child who witnessed a tragic accident and created a fantasy to cope with his grief. My client is an innocent man wrongly accused by a boy who can barely speak and a disgraced former sheriff looking for redemption." Elijah's hands clenched into fists. The first day was procedural. Motions, objections, legal maneuvering. Elijah found it excruciating. On the second day, the prosecution called its first witness, Tomas Reyes, the old Mexican vaquero, who had worked for the Mercer family for 30 years. Tomas walked to the witness stand with the dignity of a man who had nothing to hide and nothing to fear. He spoke in accented English, his voice steady and clear. "I was in the barn when I heard the shot," he testified. "I ran to the house and saw Mr. Crane standing over Mr. Mercer's body. The boy was there too, crying." "What did Mr. Crane do when he saw you?" Clark asked. "He pointed his gun at me. Said if I told anyone what happened, he'd kill me and my family. Then he grabbed the boy and dragged him away." "And what did you do?" "I hid. I waited until Mr. Crane left, then I wrote a note for Daniel, told him to run, told him to find help." "Why didn't you go to the authorities yourself?" Tomas's eyes hardened. Because the authorities were in Mr. Crane's pocket. Everyone knew that. Judge Bell, the local sheriff, half the businessmen in the territory. There was no one to trust. Price's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Reyes, isn't it true that you were recently fired from the Mercer Ranch? I was not fired. I quit after Mr. Mercer's murder. But you were having disagreements with Mr. Crane about your work performance, weren't you? Mr. Crane did not like me. That is true. But that does not change what I saw. And you expect this court to believe that you witnessed a murder, but instead of reporting it, you wrote a note and let a 9-year-old boy run for his life alone. I expect this court to understand that when a man with a gun threatens your family, you do what you must to survive. The third day, they called Dr. Samuel Morrison, the physician who had examined William Mercer's body. The cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the chest. Morrison testified. Fired at close range. The angle of entry suggests the victim was standing when he was shot, and the shooter was approximately 6 feet away. Could this have been an accident, as the defense suggests? Clark asked. Absolutely not. The precision of the shot, the angle, the distance, this was a deliberate act. Price tried to discredit the doctor's findings, suggesting alternative explanations, questioning his expertise. Morrison didn't budge. On the fourth day, Edward Clark called Daniel Mercer to the stand. The courtroom fell silent as the boy walked forward. He looked small against the massive witness chair, but his eyes were steady. He had practiced this moment for days, and Elijah knew he was ready. But knowing it and watching it were two different things. Daniel, Clark began gently, can you tell the court what happened on the night of December 28, 1878? Daniel swallowed hard. His voice was quiet but clear. I was supposed to be at school, but I came home early because I felt sick. When I got to the house, I heard voices in Pa's study. Angry voices. Whose voices? Pa and Mr. Crane. They were arguing about money. Pa said Mr. Crane had been stealing from the ranch. Said he had proof. What happened then? Mr. Crane got real quiet. That scared me more than the yelling. He said, I can't let you do that, William. Then he pulled out his gun. What did your father do? Daniel's voice cracked. He begged. He said he wouldn't tell anyone. He said he had a son, that I needed him. He got down on his knees and begged. The courtroom was utterly still. Several women in the gallery were crying openly. And then? Mr. Crane laughed. He said, should have thought about that before you started snooping. Then he shot Pa, right in the chest. What happened after? Pa fell. There was so much blood. I screamed. Mr. Crane turned and saw me. He grabbed me by the collar and dragged me over to where Pa was lying. Daniel's whole body was shaking now. He made me look, made me watch Pa die. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd do the same to me. How did you escape? Mr. Crane locked me in the cellar, said he'd decide what to do with me in the morning. But I found a loose board in the wall. I squeezed through and ran. Where did you go? I didn't know where to go. I just ran. For 3 days. I was so cold and scared. Then I found the old jailhouse in Copper Springs. I thought maybe I could hide there. And that's where Sheriff Thornton found you. Daniel looked at Elijah. A small smile crossed his face. He's not the sheriff anymore. But yes, he found me. And he saved me. Price's cross-examination began immediately. Daniel, you said your father was begging for his life. Those are very specific memories for a boy who was supposedly hiding outside the study. I wasn't hiding outside. The door was open. I could see everything. But you also said you came home early because you felt sick. Isn't it possible that you were feverish, confused, that you imagined some of what you claim to have seen? I didn't imagine my pa getting shot. But you did suffer significant trauma. Trauma can affect memory, can't it? Make us believe things that didn't happen. I know what I saw. Do you? Price moved closer. Daniel, you couldn't speak for weeks after this alleged incident. Doesn't that suggest your mind was compromised? I couldn't speak because I was scared, not because I was crazy. But how can we trust the testimony of a boy whose mind was so affected by trauma that he lost the ability to speak? Daniel's hands clenched on the arms of the witness chair. His eyes found Elijah's across the courtroom. Elijah nodded once. "You can do this." Daniel turned back to Price. "My pa taught me that a man's word is his bond. He said an honest man tells the truth even when it's hard, even when nobody believes him." His voice grew stronger. "I'm telling the truth. Mr. Crane killed my pa. I watched it happen, and no amount of fancy lawyer talk is going to change that." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel for order. Price smiled thinly. No further questions. Clark stood for redirect. "Daniel, Mr. Price suggested that your trauma might have affected your memories. Do you believe that's true?" "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because I remember everything. Every word. Every sound. The way Pa's blood spread across the floor. The way Mr. Crane smiled after he pulled the trigger." Daniel's voice broke. "I wish I could forget. I wish it every single day. But I can't. It's burned into my brain. And it always will be." Clark nodded. No further questions. Daniel stepped down from the stand. As he passed Crane's table, he stopped. "I'm not scared of you anymore," he said quietly. "Pa's watching, and he knows the truth." Crane's face went white with rage. Daniel walked to Elijah and sat down beside him. Elijah put his arm around the boy's shoulders and held him tight. "You did good, son. You did real good." The fifth day brought the ledger into evidence. Clark walked the jury through every entry. The payments to Judge Bell. The falsified cattle sales. The missing funds that added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over more than a decade. "This ledger proves that Victor Crane was systematically stealing from his employer," Clark declared. "And when William Mercer discovered the truth, Crane murdered him to protect his secrets." Price objected constantly, challenged the ledger's authenticity, suggested it had been tampered with, questioned the chain of custody. Judge Whitmore overruled him every time. The sixth day, the prosecution rested. The defense called character witnesses who testified to Crane's good reputation, business associates who praised his integrity, church members who spoke of his generous donations. Elijah wanted to vomit. Finally, Price called Victor Crane himself to the stand. Crane walked to the witness chair with the confidence of a man who had never faced consequences in his life. He smiled at the jury, the picture of wronged innocence. "Mr. Crane," Price began, "did you kill William Mercer?" "No, sir, I did not." "Then how do you explain the testimony we've heard? William and I were friends, partners. Yes, we argued sometimes what business associates don't. But on the night in question, I wasn't even at the ranch. I was in town attending a meeting of the Cattlemen's Association. Can anyone verify that?" "Several people. I'll provide their names." "And what about Daniel's testimony? The boy claims he saw you shoot his father." Crane shook his head sadly. "Daniel is a troubled child. He's always been fragile. His mother died when he was young and he never quite recovered. I believe he witnessed his father's tragic accident and created a story to cope with his grief. A story where there's a villain to blame instead of senseless tragedy. And the ledger? A fabrication, created by Tomas Reyes to frame me. The man has always resented my authority. He wanted my position and was willing to destroy me to get it." The lies flowed so smoothly, so convincingly. Elijah watched the jury and felt his heart sink. Some of them looked uncertain, doubtful. Clark's cross-examination was fierce. "Mr. Crane, you claim you were at a Cattlemen's Association meeting on the night of the murder. But the association's records show that the meeting was canceled due to weather. How do you explain that?" Crane's smile flickered. I may be mistaken about the date." "You're mistaken about your alibi for a murder. It was weeks ago. Memory can be imperfect." "Imperfect, like Daniel's memory you suggested. That's different. Is it?" Clark picked up the ledger. Mr. Crane, this ledger is in your handwriting. Our expert witnesses have confirmed it. Are you suggesting that Tomas Reyes somehow forged 15 years of your personal records? I'm suggesting that anything can be fabricated with enough motivation. And the bodies in the mine shaft, the dozen men found with your ranch's brand on the crates beside them. Did Tomas fabricate those too? Crane's composure cracked. I don't know anything about any bodies. Really? Because one of those bodies has been identified as James Patterson, a man who worked for you in 1875, a man who disappeared after he started asking questions about missing cattle. Coincidence. And Marcus Webb found with a bullet in his skull. He worked for you too, disappeared in 1877. I have a large operation. People come and go. They seem to go permanently when they work for you, Mr. Crane. Objection! Price shouted. Withdrawn. Clark turned to the jury. No further questions. The closing arguments came on the 7th day. Price painted a picture of a good man destroyed by lies, a grieving community desperate for someone to blame, a child whose trauma had warped his perception of reality. Clark painted a different picture. Victor Crane is a murderer, a thief, a man who built his fortune on the bodies of those who got in his way. William Mercer discovered the truth, and Crane executed him for it. In front of his own son, Clark pointed at Daniel. That boy has more courage in his little finger than Victor Crane has in his entire body. He survived 3 days alone in the wilderness. He faced down the man who killed his father. And he sat in that witness chair and told the truth, even knowing that the truth could get him killed. He turned back to the jury. William Mercer was a good man, a loving father. He deserved better than to be gunned down by someone he trusted. His son deserves justice. This territory deserves to know that no one is above the law, not even men with money and power and judges in their pockets. Find Victor Crane guilty, for William, for Daniel, for all of us. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Elijah paced the hallway outside the courtroom, his wound aching with every step. Clara sat on a bench, her hands folded in her lap. Daniel stood by the window watching the street below. What if they let him go? Daniel asked quietly. They won't. But what if they do? Elijah crouched down to Daniel's level. Then we keep fighting. We go to the newspapers. We tell everyone what happened. We make so much noise that they have to listen. And if that doesn't work, it will work. Justice takes time sometimes, but it comes. It always comes. The door opened. The bailiff stepped out. They've reached a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the jury filed back in. 12 men, their faces unreadable. Judge Whitmore turned to the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find? The foreman looked at Crane, then at Daniel. Guilty. The gallery erupted. Daniel grabbed Elijah's hand and squeezed. Clara burst into tears. Crane shot to his feet. This is a travesty. I'll appeal. Silence! Whitmore banged his gavel. Victor Crane, you have been found guilty of murder in the first degree. You will be remanded to custody pending sentencing. This court is adjourned. As the marshals led Crane away, he passed Daniel's row. He stopped, his eyes boring into the boy with pure hatred. This isn't over, he hissed. You'll pay for this. You and everyone who helped you. Daniel didn't flinch. My pa said the truth always wins. He was right. Crane was dragged away, his threats echoing off the marble walls. Elijah pulled Daniel into a hug. It's over, he said. It's really over. Daniel hugged him back fiercely. Thank you, the boy whispered. Thank you for believing me. Always, son, always. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Photographers' flashes exploded. Questions were shouted from every direction. But Elijah barely heard any of it. He was looking at Clara, at Daniel, at this strange little family that had formed in the crucible of the past weeks. And for the first time in 4 years, He felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. 6 months passed like water through open fingers. Elijah stood at the fence of the Mercer Ranch, watching Daniel ride circles in the corral. The boy had grown 2 inches since the trial, his shoulders filling out, his voice deepening. He sat a horse like he'd been born in the saddle. "He's good," Clara said, coming up beside Elijah. "He's better than good. He's a natural." Like his father was. Better than his father, according to Tomas. They watched in comfortable silence as Daniel put the young mare through her paces. The ranch had been held in trust during the trial, waiting for Daniel to come of age. Until then, Tomas ran the day-to-day operations with Elijah providing oversight. It wasn't a role Elijah had expected, or wanted really, but when the territorial court had asked him to serve as Daniel's legal guardian, he hadn't hesitated. "You're thinking too loud," Clara said. "Am I? You get that crease between your eyebrows when you're brooding. I don't brood." "Elijah Thornton, you are the broodiest man I have ever met." He laughed. It still surprised him sometimes the way laughter came so easily now. For 4 years, he'd forgotten how. Daniel saw them watching and trotted over. His face was flushed with exertion, his hair damp with sweat despite the cool spring air. "Did you see that?" he asked breathlessly. She took the jump without even hesitating. "I saw. You're getting good, son." "Tomas says I might be ready for the spring roundup." "We'll see." "That means no." "It means we'll see." Daniel rolled his eyes in that particular way that all boys his age seemed to master. Then he grinned and rode back toward the barn. Clara slipped her hand into Elijah's. "Have you thought any more about what we discussed?" "I've thought about it." "And?" Elijah turned to face her. 6 months they'd been dancing around this. 6 months of shared meals and quiet evenings, and moments that felt like they meant something more. "I'm not an easy man to live with," he said. "I know. I've got demons, dark days, mornings where I can barely get out of bed." "I know that too. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again. If I'll ever be the man I was before." Clara cupped his face in her hands. "I don't want the man you were before. I want the man you are now. The man who rode through a blizzard to save a child. The man who stood up to Victor Crane when no one else would. The man who makes Daniel laugh and keeps me warm at night." "Clara, I love you, Elijah. I've loved you since you showed up at my door half dead with a little boy in your arms. Maybe I loved you before that, when you were just the sad man buying whiskey at my pharmacy. I don't know. All I know is that I don't want to spend another day pretending I don't." Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "You deserve better than me." "Don't tell me what I deserve. I'll decide that for myself." He looked at her. Really looked. The gray in her hair, the lines around her eyes, the strength and the softness and the stubborn determination that had kept her going through her own losses. "All right," he said. "All right what?" "All right, I'll marry you." Clara's eyes widened. "I didn't ask you to marry me." "No, but you were going to. Figured I'd save you the trouble. You arrogant, presumptuous—" He kissed her. It was a good kiss. The kind of kiss that makes promises and keeps them. When they broke apart, Clara was crying, but she was smiling too. "I hate you," she said. "I know. We're not doing this at some fancy church with 100 people staring at us. Wouldn't dream of it. And Daniel has to be there. He's part of this family now. Wouldn't have it any other way." Daniel appeared around the corner of the barn. "Are you two finally done being stupid?" Clara laughed. "You knew. Everyone knew. The whole town's been taking bets on when you'd figure it out." "Who won?" Elijah asked. "Tomas. He said it would happen before summer. Something about stubborn gringos needing time." They had the wedding 3 weeks later. It was a small affair. Just family and close friends gathered in the parlor of the Mercer Ranch house. Reverend Thomas from Denver performed the ceremony. Tomas served as best man. Martha Perkins, old Perkins' wife, stood up for Clara. Daniel stood between them, holding both their hands as they exchanged vows. "Do you, Elijah Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Elijah looked at Clara, at Daniel, at the life that had somehow risen from the ashes of everything he'd lost. "I do." "And do you, Clara Whitfield, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara's eyes never left Elijah's face. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife." Daniel cheered. Tomas wiped his eyes. Martha dabbed at her face with a handkerchief. Elijah kissed his bride. "Now what?" Clara whispered. "Now we live." The summer brought challenges. Running a ranch the size of Mercer's was no small task, even with Tomas's expertise. Elijah had to learn quickly. Cattle prices, feed schedules, breeding cycles, the thousand small details that kept the operation profitable. Some days he felt overwhelmed, lost, like a man pretending to be something he wasn't. But Daniel was always there, teaching him things that William Mercer had taught him, patient and eager the way only a child can be. "You're putting the bit in wrong," Daniel said one morning. "I know how to bridle a horse." "Not this horse. She's got a sensitive mouth. You have to go gentle." Elijah watched as Daniel demonstrated. The boy's hands were sure and confident. "Your pa teach you that?" "Yeah." Daniel's face flickered with grief, but it passed quickly. "He taught me a lot of things. He was a good man." "He was. But you're good too. Different good, but still good." Elijah didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and let Daniel show him the right way. In August, a letter arrived from the territorial prison. Victor Crane had been sentenced to hang. The execution was scheduled for September 15th. Elijah read the letter twice. Then he set it aside and went about his day. But that night Daniel found him sitting alone on the porch. "You got the letter," Daniel said. "I got it." "Are you going?" "To the hanging, no." "Why not?" Elijah was quiet for a moment. "Because watching a man die doesn't undo what he did. It doesn't bring your father back. It doesn't erase the memories. It's just death. And I've seen enough death to last a lifetime." Daniel sat down beside him. "I thought about going. Thought maybe it would make me feel better, like finally closing a door." "Does it feel that way?" "No, it just feels empty." Daniel looked out at the darkening sky. "Pa used to say that hate is like holding a hot coal. You're the one who gets burned." "Your pa was a smart man." "I don't hate Victor anymore. I don't think I even hate what he did. I just feel sad. For Pa. For me. For all the years we won't have together." Elijah put his arm around Daniel's shoulders. "That's not hate, son. That's grief. And grief is healthy. It means you loved something worth losing." "Does it ever go away?" "No. But it changes. Gets softer around the edges. Makes room for other things." "Like what?" Elijah thought about Clara inside preparing dinner. About the ranch that was becoming home. About this boy who had crashed into his life and saved him from himself. Like new love, new family, new reasons to keep going. Daniel leaned against him. "I'm glad you found me," he said quietly. "That night in the jailhouse. I'm glad it was you." "So am I, son. So am I." September came and went. Victor Crane hanged on a Tuesday morning. Elijah didn't attend. Neither did Daniel. Instead, they spent the day riding the north pasture, checking fence lines and counting cattle. Ordinary work. The kind of work that kept a man grounded. That evening, Elijah took Daniel to the small cemetery on the hill where William Mercer was buried. They stood at the grave in silence. Daniel had brought wildflowers, which he laid carefully at the base of the headstone. "Hey, Pa," Daniel said softly. "It's me. I brought Elijah. You'd like him. He's kind of grumpy and he doesn't talk much, but he's good. Real good. Elijah shifted uncomfortably. He saved my life, Pa. More than once. And he didn't have to. He could have turned me away that first night. Should have, probably. But he didn't. He kept me safe. Daniel's voice cracked. I miss you. Every day. Sometimes I wake up and forget you're gone. And then I remember. And it's like losing you all over again. But it's getting better. Like Elijah said. The grief is making room for other things. He wiped his eyes. I got a new family now. Clara's like the mama I never had. And Elijah, he's not trying to replace you. Nobody could ever replace you. But he's there, every day, teaching me things, listening to me, loving me. Daniel turned to Elijah. I want to say something. Go ahead. Pa Elijah asked me last week if I wanted him to adopt me, make it legal and official. I said I needed to think about it. But I've been thinking, and I know what I want to say now. Elijah held his breath. I want to say yes. I want to be his son. Not because I'm forgetting you, but because you taught me that family is about love, not just blood. And I love Elijah. He's my pa now too. Both of you are. Tears streamed down Daniel's face, but he was smiling. So yeah, Daniel Mercer Thornton. That's who I'm gonna be. And I hope you're okay with that. The wind rustled through the grass. A bird sang somewhere in the distance. Elijah put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. I think he's okay with it, he said roughly. How do you know? Because any father who raised a boy like you would want that boy to be happy. And you're happy, aren't you? Daniel nodded. Then he's okay with it. I guarantee it. The adoption papers were signed on the first day of October. Judge Whitmore himself presided over the ceremony, having traveled from Denver specifically for the occasion. It's not every day I get to do something that feels entirely right, he said as he stamped the final document. Elijah Thornton, you are now the legal father of Daniel Mercer Thornton. May God bless this family. Daniel hugged Elijah so hard it drove the breath from his lungs. I have a pa again, he whispered. You always had a pa. Now you just have two. Clara joined the embrace, wrapping her arms around both of them. My boys, she said. My brave, stubborn, wonderful boys. Tomas stood in the corner trying very hard not to cry and failing completely. That night, they had a celebration at the ranch. Half the territory seemed to show up. Cowboys and farmers and townspeople who had followed the trial, who had rooted for this strange little family, formed in the crucible of tragedy. Old Perkins brought a barrel of his best cider. Martha Perkins brought 3 pies. The Chens sent fireworks from their shop in town. Daniel ran through the crowd laughing and playing with the other children. Clara danced with anyone who asked. Tomas told increasingly embellished stories about the Mercer family's glory days. Elijah stood apart, watching it all, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Clara found him near midnight. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Standing in corners looking like you're about to bolt. Old habits. She slipped her arm through his. Are you happy, Elijah? He thought about the question, really thought about it. I don't know if happy is the right word. Content, maybe. Grateful. Like I finally landed somewhere after years of falling. That sounds like happy to me. Maybe. I'm still learning what happy feels like. We can learn together. Daniel appeared breathless from running. Pa Tomas says if we go to the North Ridge, we can see the fireworks better. Can we go? Pa. The word still hit Elijah like a punch to the chest. The good kind of punch. Sure, son, let's go. They climbed the ridge together, the 3 of them. The whole territory spread out below, dark and peaceful, under a canopy of stars. The first firework exploded overhead, showering the sky with gold and red. Daniel gasped with delight. Clara leaned her head on Elijah's shoulder. And Elijah Thornton, who had planned to die on New Year's Eve, who had lost everything and found it again in the most unexpected way, allowed himself to feel something he thought he'd lost forever. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "Pa," Daniel said. "Yeah. What's going to happen now?" Elijah looked at his son, at his wife, at the fireworks painting the sky with light. "Now we live, son. We just live." The winter that followed was the happiest of Elijah's life. He learned to be a father again, learned to help with homework and settle nightmares and navigate the complicated emotions of a 10-year-old boy. He made mistakes constantly, but Daniel forgave him every time. He learned to be a husband again, learned Clara's rhythms and moods and the way she liked her coffee in the morning. They argued sometimes, but they always made up. Love, it turned out, was not about perfection. It was about showing up day after day and choosing each other. He learned to be himself again. Not the man he was before the robbery, because that man was gone forever, but someone new, someone shaped by loss and grief and redemption. Someone who had scars but wasn't defined by them. On Christmas morning, exactly 1 year after everything began, Elijah woke early. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake Clara, and walked through the house to Daniel's room. The boy was still asleep, one arm thrown over his pillow, mouth slightly open. Elijah watched him for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. The smell of bacon and coffee drew Daniel down the stairs. "Merry Christmas, Pa." "Merry Christmas, son." They worked side by side, setting the table, preparing the food. Clara joined them eventually, her hair mussed from sleep, wearing one of Elijah's old shirts. "Merry Christmas," she said, kissing them both. After breakfast, they exchanged gifts. Daniel had carved a wooden horse for Elijah, painstakingly detailed. Clara had knitted him a new scarf. Elijah gave Daniel a pocket watch that had belonged to his own father, and Clara a ring that had belonged to Maggie. "Are you sure?" Clara asked, looking at the ring. "Maggie would have wanted you to have it. She believed in love, in second chances. She would have liked you." Clara slipped it on her finger. A perfect fit. After the gifts, Daniel asked if they could visit the cemetery. They rode out together through snow that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. William Mercer's grave was covered in white, peaceful and quiet. Daniel knelt and brushed the snow away. "Hey, Pa, Merry Christmas. I brought the family." He talked for a while, telling William about the ranch, about school, about the new foal that had been born last month. Elijah and Clara stood back, giving him space. When Daniel finished, he stood and took Elijah's hand. "Can we go see the others now?" Elijah's throat tightened. "The others? Your wife, your daughter. I want to meet them." Elijah hadn't been to Maggie and Lucy's graves since before he'd found Daniel. He'd avoided them, afraid of what he'd feel, afraid of the guilt and grief that might overwhelm him. But Daniel was looking at him with such trust, such certainty. "All right," Elijah said. "Let's go." The Copper Springs Cemetery was small, just a handful of headstones on a hill overlooking the town. Elijah led them to 2 graves side by side. Margaret Ellen Thornton, Lucy May Thornton, his wife, his daughter. Daniel stepped forward. "Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm your husband's new son." He paused. "I mean, I'm not replacing Lucy. Nobody could ever replace her. But Elijah's my pa now, and I wanted you to know that I'm taking care of him, making sure he eats and sleeps and doesn't work too hard." Elijah felt Clara's hand slip into his. "He's really good, you know. He saved my life when he didn't have to. He fought for me when nobody else would. He taught me that it's okay to be sad sometimes, and it's okay to be happy too." Daniel turned to Elijah. "What was Lucy like?" The question hit Elijah like a wave. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Clara squeezed his hand. "She was 8. Elijah finally managed. "Dark hair like yours. She loved horses, loved to read. She used to make me read her the same story every night before bed over and over until I had it memorized. What story? A book of fairy tales her mother had brought from back east. Her favorite was about a princess who got lost in the woods and was rescued by a kind woodcutter. Did she like happy endings? She did. She always said the happy ending was the most important part. Without it, what was the point? Daniel nodded slowly. I think she'd like this ending then. You and Clara and me. A family. Elijah couldn't speak. The tears he'd held back for 4 years finally broke free, streaming down his face. Daniel hugged him. Clara hugged them both. And there in that small cemetery, surrounded by the people he'd lost and the people he'd found, Elijah Thornton finally let go. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the grief. Let go of the man he couldn't save and the life he couldn't keep. And in their place, he held on to something new. Hope. Love. Family. The things that mattered. The things that lasted. They rode home as the sun climbed higher in the winter sky. Daniel talked the whole way, excited about Christmas dinner and the games they'd play afterward. Clara laughed at his enthusiasm, her cheeks pink from the cold. Elijah listened and smiled and let the warmth of their voices wash over him. A year ago, he'd been ready to die. Now, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he was ready to live. That night, after Daniel was asleep and the fire had burned low, Elijah sat in his chair and pulled out the old sheriff's star he'd carried for so long. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its familiar weight. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked from the doorway. "That I spent a long time running from this, from what it represented, from who I used to be. And now I think maybe it's time to stop running." He looked up at her. "Sheriff Morrison is retiring in the spring. Town council asked if I'd consider taking the job." "What did you tell them?" "That I'd think about it." He paused. "What do you think?" Clara crossed the room and sat on the arm of his chair. "I think you were a good sheriff once, and I think you'd be an even better one now, because you understand things you didn't understand before. About loss, about redemption, about second chances. It would mean danger, responsibility, long hours away from you and Daniel. It would also mean making a difference, protecting people, being the man you were always meant to be." Elijah looked at the star, then he looked at Clara, then he looked at the door to Daniel's room where his son slept peacefully. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." Clara kissed his forehead. "Good. Now come to bed. You've got a lot of living to do tomorrow." Elijah smiled. He set the star on the mantel where it caught the firelight and gleamed. Then he took his wife's hand and walked toward their room. Behind him, through the window, the first snow of the new year began to fall. Soft and white and clean, like a new beginning. Like hope made visible. Like the second chance he never thought he'd get. And Elijah Thornton, former sheriff, former drunk, former ghost of a man, walked into his future with his head high and his heart full. Because some men are destroyed by tragedy, and some men are forged by it, and some men, the lucky ones, the blessed ones, get the chance to rise from the ashes and become something better than they ever were before. Elijah was one of the lucky ones. He knew that now, and he would spend the rest of his life proving it.